But no, we didn't have. They didn't have any problem like that. Now there was some feuding going on with the guy who went tarpon fishing because back then whoever controlled the hotel, and that was the Boat Grand Hotel in the Gasparilla Inn, divvied out the guy.
Trips.
Yeah. And me and Freddie had a little fist fight about that on the dock. Because he hired me and for 3 days, and then he canceled me, and then come to find out he was booking himself and Pete and Fred and them for double day trips. I said, "Whoa, wait a minute now! You mean I'm sitting at the dock and they're running a double day?"
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And Dark got into that, middle of that.
Well, like the 70s. So when Jack Harper bought the marina, what year did Jack buy the marina from the Mac Miller?
Right after it burnt down.
Yeah.
So what,
I'm trying to
74
think. I watched
maybe?
it
That was
burn,
going
but
to
I
be
can't remember
75
that.
or 76 or something like that, maybe.
Now,
Yeah.
people that don't know Jack
70,
Harper, how did Jack come here? Do you guys remember? Now, he was a football player for the Dolphins. I remember that story.
And Florida Gators.
He was
a Gator.
Raymond Rodriguez brought him here.
Raymond Senior or Junior?
Junior.
Okay.
And
He came
they
here
had
as a
big ideas that they were going on.
Well, he was
Well, he came
part of
here
that
as a
Lakeland group.
He came as a developer he came in and started first developing the condos, the
Townhouses.
the
Yeah,
townhouses,
townhouses.
Turtleback, and I think that might have been the first one.
Now,
He-
this was after his football career, obviously.
Ridley
Oh, yeah.
Realty.
Yeah.
Remember
With-
that? Ridley Realty.
With,
That's right,
and
I do
he was
remember
living in Lakeland, and that's kind of when the development, there was a big surge of the development started. Our first condos were being built, and he came in through that. I'm not sure how he came, whether he met George Earhart, because I know he ended up working at one point with George.
And there was also a lot of running out to the shrimp boats and getting shrimp on shore.
Yeah, I heard of those stories.
There were,
Contraband
the
shrimp.
kind that came in square
Those are
pens.
all
Yeah,
rumors. Those are all rumors.
They're all rumors.
Didn't he own part of Boca Grande Real Estate at one point? I think he
Yeah,
did.
yeah,
His wife started it.
I think
Yeah, because
I think that's how he and
It was
George.
Glenda, wasn't it?
Yeah, her and George.
But it was George, yeah, I thought got started with Jack or.
I think it kind of started with Ridley Realty, and somehow Glenda and George. I'm
Yeah.
not 100% sure about that. I know Mark says that Boca Grande Real Estate's always been him and George, but
Yeah, no.
I think that name was
Glenda was
Yeah.
there.
His name was
'Cause I
Glenda.
bought my property from Glenda.
Yeah, and it was Boca Grande Real Estate, and that's what I thought.
Well, he definitely kind of amped up the promotion of tarpon fishing around
He
here.
liked to run the tarpon fish.
He almost did before it was all over. He definitely changed it.
Well, actually, that was not through his tournaments in there in the beginning, but there towards the end, whenever he started bringing all those jig boats in
Yeah.
there. I mean, he's the one that got all that stuff started.
Yeah, we all got
Absolutely,
out. We all
he
quit
did
fishing.
it, and the reason that he did that was because
Money.
He's bringing the
but
business in.
the same thing happened is the old guys, the local guys, started not getting in it. Didn't want to get in it and stuff, and he had to have. So he brought the jigger. But see, Mark Futch was the first one with the jig.
Oh yeah. Well,
Well, he and they kind of took it. It was actually Chris Klingle was one of the first.
Chris.
Dr. Bradley was one of the first jig people out of St. Petersburg.
Yeah.
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 Yeah,
He the
Bradley,
one that
and
had
then
that
Bradley.
He the one that had
they
that
fished
little-
with my brother-in-law's.
Well, I tell you, all of us pretty much
man out there that
tried it
had
out.
that little-
When
I
those-
did it a lot.
When those jigs first
Yeah, I
came
don't know what that
out,
guy's
we
name
all
was.
tried
They called him
it.
James-
Yeah,
Because there
he
was a
did.
lot of fish being hooked with those jigs. And I mean, I'm a professional. You know, I've done a lot of bass fishing, so I have no problem with artificial bait. So I jumped right on the jig too, thinking, you know, this is going to be something good. But it didn't take me long to realize that they were foul hooking those fish, and I quit pretty daggone quick. I maybe a season or two.
I remember when a young guy just got started a couple of years, stood there in my face, me and Dickie Coleman. Y'all are going to either have to change over to using them jigs, or you're going to go by the wayside.
Yeah.
That wasn't me.
No, well, at first I thought that's the way. Well, they were catching hell out of them until we figured. But until we
They
figured
were
it out.
buying. They were buying.
But
they
you
were
were
buying.
right, and you were absolutely 100% right. And and Dickie was using those jigs too. Now,
I know he was.
You know, we all were doing them.
I was one of the
No,
ones
we
that
all
wouldn't.
wasn't doing it.
No,
I wasn't doing
Well,
it.
not all of them, but there was a lot of guys trying to figure out just what exactly was going on with that deal, because it didn't make any sense. You know, when they're hooking those fish on that slack water, when you can't get a bite, fly line, and a
But-
live bait, something was
But
up.
they, Sandy, the story you're telling there is a history of Boca Grande.
Yeah,
People come in here, Jack Harper and everybody else, and they start all this crap, and then pretty soon they're gone. And,
Yeah.
and you're left with all this bunch of, and they think they know better than the local people.
Just as that jigging was starting to take off, I went out there one afternoon with a friend of mine. We jumped 7 fish on one drift. And Nick Lopez leaned over the side of the flying bridge of his boat, and he spoke words of wisdom to me. He says, Johns, when everybody does what you're doing right now, because he had been watching me, he says, when everybody's doing that, he says, nobody's going to be able to fish in this pass.
you're
I
right.
folded up that rig that I had, and I will carry it to my grave. I'll never tell what I was doing. If there was 6 boats out there doing that, I guarantee you they wouldn't be able to fish.
Yeah.
I guarantee it. My
Yeah, it got
daddy
to
ran
where-
Jack Harper out of his house that time.
We're not gonna tell us the secret.
Not going to
Going to the grave
I'm
with
not-
it.
I'm
Jack
going to
Harper
grave.
came to
Thank
him
goodness.
We jumped 7 on
wanted
one
him to
drift.
be in the tournament and stuff. And my daddy went off on him.
Yeah. Well,
And,
Yeah, a lot of people like Freddie really never. He fished maybe 1 or 2 in his the whole
Yeah.
career. Won and never fished it with Rob Wells. Never fished again. It's that tarpon hanging over out there on the porch.
I
And,
never fished but about 3 of Jack's tournaments, and I fished the biggest part of the big tournament, but that's the only tournament I would fish.
Well, Jack got greedy. He started with 1, then he did 2 a season, then it was 4 a season, then it was every weekend.
Yeah.
When he brought those jiggers
And
in, it was every
that's
weekend.
Well, when they
Whenever
brought
it
the
went
jigger
down.
in, that changed the whole.
In the
That just
whole-
like bringing the bridge in.
And it was part of the marketing program to bring people into tarpon fishing and to buy real estate. It was started, he had real estate he wanted to sell. He had a restaurant he was running, and he started out saying he was helping the guys bringing in business. And that all started out slow in the beginning, but then it escalated just like everything else does because everybody got greedy. That's kind of my opinion about it.
Well, and he kept half the Calcutta.
Yeah.
We only got half.
Yeah.
And so he was making,
He was
if we
making a
made
lot of money.
30,000 winning a tournament, he made more than 30,000.
But I didn't really notice that there was that much more work because I was running double days long before Jack Harper ever come to Boca Grande.
Right.
And
No, he was
it
making
was
money for
years
the
after
dog.
that it started tapering down because of that.
And he brought in a lot of new captains that were making money at the docks.
Yeah,
making
like
money
Mike
at the-
Bailey.
Bulldog.
He brought in Bulldog. and
Bulldog
stayed
Bailey.
there.
There's another blast.
Van Hubbard.
Yeah.
And me and Dumpo just naming off guides there a while ago. I hear so many times now say, well, there's just so many more guides now. How many guides was there back then? About 60?
I don't know.
At one time, there was a bunch. When I started, there were a bunch of
There
guys.
was a lot.
I thought there was like 30 something.
Well, and I'm talking, when I say the guides here, like Bob Spear and Arthur
Oh, yeah,
Coleman,
yeah.
when you bring
And I tell you
those
something
year
about,
round,
And
somebody
they,
else
and
we
they
forgot
all
about?
they all lived
Wink Coleman?
here. They didn't just come down.
Lanier.
yeah.
Well, in my opinion, back, I remember at least from the early to mid 80s on through the 90s, it seemed like to me there was a lot more boats in that pass than there is now.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean,
And-
people talk about how crowded the pass is now. They don't remember those days back in the summer on a hilltide in
And there was,
June.
a lot more fish, too.
Late-
Well, there was more
60s.
fish, but there was more people fishing. Nowadays, I don't think people fish as much as the population. They're on their computers or cell phones
Yeah.
or whatever. We don't have the fishing community that we had back in the 80s.
Well, like
Early
Nat,
90s.
like Nat said it though, but we used to have those big companies that came here,
Right.
and they were one right after the other. There wasn't.
Yeah.
So when you got rid of one of the next day you took out another big company.
Yeah, that from about the mid '60s to the late '70s, early '80s, there'd be 100 to 150 boats in that pass, day and night.
Right.
They were, and they were
Starting
good sized boats.
mid-April,
Right.
yeah.
They were good
Well, I
sized
remember that
boats.
Miss Budweiser was out there. That's what 72 or whatever it was.
24 to
Island,
60 foot.
Clark Balsinger,
And what was
big boat.
amazing is that now when you get 40 boats
It
that
seems
are
like it's hard to
averaging
fish.
24 feet, it's so crowded. And that only
Yeah.
tells me one thing. That's boat behavior.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah,
That's
no,
all that
the
is.
boatmanship has always been the biggest key of Boca Grande Pass to me. I mean, the first thing I learned out there was you're never going to get the appreciation or the respect from the other guides if you don't learn to get your fish out of the fleet of boats. If
That
you
was
don't
one
get your
of
fish
the-
out of there after you hook one up, then you're going to catch hell.
Can
And
we
one
go
of the-
back to one of the stories that we were telling before Rick put us on camera, I think, was back when Johnson and Dumpling were talking about there were no radios.
No.
How did you act as a captain on your boat when you had no radio?
One thing, the very first thing you did was respect the old timers.
Right.
Yeah,
And-
absolutely.
That's right.
And they carried a lot of weight.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And like I say, you know, when you're young and you get your captain's license, you think you're hot, you know, around.
Learned pretty quick.
Yeah. Just what pecking order you're in.
Yeah, you know, speaking of that, I never forget that. I'm guilty of that. I remember I come in one day at Whitman's Marina after I had a good morning and pulled my boat up, back the old Boca Blue in there and let the folks off and was sitting there and Cappy Joyner pulled back in right beside me and something that my customer said something. He said, we caught 6 or whatever it was we caught. We like you said, I was a little fired up. I had a really good morning, and I don't know if Cappy had a bad morning or if he just didn't want to hear it. But the minute those people left, I got myself chewed out pretty good for even talking about how many fish we caught that morning at that dock. And I learned real quick, just leave that alone. Just don't even bother about that. You let your people go tell the story when they get to the restaurant or whatever, but you don't talk about it at the dock and they think you're all that. When
You know, I never come in and say, well, I caught 6 fish or go to the restaurant.
Not in front of somebody.
I don't even say anything.
Yeah. Well, I learned real quick, don't say it in front of Cappy.
Well, Johns and our group caught hell all the time because we caught so many fish at night. And our people would sit with your people having breakfast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
Caught
supper.
15 last night or something like that.
Well, you know,
I remember Cappy telling me
You know what my daddy
they were
told
trying to
me?
ban night fishing. Remember that?
Oh, I know. They tried that a
They
bunch
tried
of
to
times.
ban
You know what
night
my
fishing.
daddy told Francis Knight that time? He came in the restaurant. I think he caught 15 fish or something like that. And you know Francis wasn't best at taking some stuff.
when I started, I fished at night too, because I got the jobs. My original jobs were mostly from Billy Hathcock, and he mainly was a night fisherman. So
Yeah, well, we when I started, my mentors fished it early in the morning and late in the evening.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, they go fishing either 4 or 5 in the morning, come in, have breakfast.
Yeah.
People go into town and do whatever, or they play golf or whatever, and then you go back fishing 3 or 4 in the afternoon.
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and then they got into it 9 to
more
Boat
civil.
with your dad,
Yeah.
you just fished straight on through. You didn't go in during noon, did you?
But you know what was
And
good
then you
about
had the
that?
ones like Jimmy Mobley and all that, they went at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah,
Both
9 to
did.
noon.
And they,
Both
9
did.
o'clock in the morning.
And 2 in the afternoon.
And 2 or 3 in the afternoon. They didn't go early in the
They
morning.
might
and
waver
didn't
an
go
hour
late.
on the afternoon
I think
trip.
they had something to do with the rum.
Yeah.
But they used to give you, when they came on your boat, if they stayed at the Gasper Inn, they'd bring box lunches.
Yeah.
And I loved that. I
Yeah,
loved that.
I did too.
You know what happened was my daddy had Mrs. Jennings and them, and they'd get out there, and there were 4 box lunches there, right? And of course, the Mrs. Jennings and them eat 1 hard-boiled egg or something, and that'd be it. And then I'd have all those roast beef sandwiches.
For fried, loved it when they had fried chicken.
Yeah.
Well, you know,
Well, that's why I was mentioning jerking your chain. I always remember when I first started guiding, we'd get out there and you were known to get on that radio a lot, and talk, and just shoot the breeze, and you always had fried chicken on your boat. Nat would be out there with a fish on, if it wasn't a double header, at night, eating chicken and telling a story on the radio all at the same time.
That's how I got
Yeah,
my
well,
that's how I got my nickname.
Yeah.
WNAT.
Yeah.
That's how what my daddy did that time. The people came on the boat and didn't bring the captain in Bogland, and you know the hotel all that boy, you get the captain a little extra, you know.
Yeah.
And they did that for 2 days. And the third day, my daddy put that Coleman stove on there and that black frying pan. And when they got out this back box lunches to eat, he reached in that ice cooler and put a big old T-bone steak in there, and that thing went all over that patch. You could smell it.
Just so he could have a steak.
And those people
Just to show them they was gonna
said,
eat.
"Damn, that smells good. I wish I had some."
He said, I wish I had a box lunch yesterday.
Jimmy Robertson always used to be on the radio with his meatloaf sandwiches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Martin Smart meatloaf sandwiches.
Now there's a guy we need to talk about too, Jimmy
Jimmy
Robertson.
Robertson.
He was a character. He's no longer with us, but Jimmy was a pistol now. I mean, he's really widely known as probably one of the best grouper fishermen around, offshore guys. I mean, he was a heck of a bottom fisherman out there, and but he was a bit of a character too.
I remember when they came in, I can't remember why they stopped in Boca Grande, but they were on their way home. They stopped in Boca Grande. They had that old commercial fishing boat.
Yeah, and you couldn't see the stern.
They stopped they pulled into Miller's Marine, and everybody was going tarpon fishing, so they rigged up some grouper rods and went out and started fishing. He decided he liked it and stayed.
Well, no, he used to work for Nick Lopez.
Did he work for Nick?
Yeah, he did.
That's why he stopped
Three.
in.
Yeah.
But they
Now,
liked
where was
it.
Jimmy from? Is he up Tampa area up
St.
there?
Pete, Clearwater.
I remember Nick Lopez get on that radio one day and telling Jimmy, said, "Don't you let no local guy push you around out there. Now, I mean it. Don't you let."
Nick would come down every spring. Nick would come from Tampa, right, or St. Pete area.
Yeah,
And then Clearwater. And then Buck would bring the Comer boat down. He'd come down from the Panama City area.
And Lou Hines.
Oh.
And then Bill Miller, I can't remember who's Bill work on.
He was on Treasure
Knits?
Isles
On
when he
Treasure
first
Isles.
came.
Okay.
Yeah, was that when Ray was running it?
No, that was I can't remember the guy. Stacy, I think was
Stacy.
the name. He's an older fella.
Yeah, I heard about him.
Who?
That
Ran the
came
Treasure
here with
Island in
like
the beginning.
53 headers. Treasure
He
Isles.
used to stay at the
Before Ray
Millers.
Howard.
Yeah,
Lou
that's-
Hines. No, and
Remember
They bring their
Louis
boats in the
Zimmerman?
Millers and they dock there for the season.
Remember Louis Zimmerman had that
Yeah.
the Cardinal?
yeah,
You know,
stayed at Sam Whidden.
Yeah.
Oh, Nick, when I was a freshman guy, Nick kind of pushed me around on that pass a little bit. in the early
He
mornings.
would. He would. Yeah,
He'd
he
come
would.
up and line up. He'd come up and get as close as he could to me for a drift, and I'd have to be afraid I was going to hit him, and I'd have to move. He'd just look over.
Yeah, well, Freddie was famous for that, though.
Yeah.
Didn't
Freddie
nobody
was-
push anybody
let me tell
around
what
more than
Freddie
Freddie
was
did.
most famous for.
Well,
He was most famous for getting a tarpon on and taking off over there to the old pier, and then come backing up full speed with us. Because everybody said, "Well, we all gonna have to move because Fred be backing up here in a minute."
yeah, yeah.
He'd hook
Or
up.
you know that tarpon's gonna run right back to the hole. I don't care what.
Yeah.
If you don't put enough drag on there, you can't get him out. So
Yeah,
he every time he'd always do that. Oh,
only person you couldn't mess with out there in my day was Charlie Downing, though.
oh,
Charlie just stand back there like this.
You know, Charlie's.
It didn't matter if you.
reputation does it.
Yeah,
Freddie
yeah,
wouldn't.
yeah.
Freddie wouldn't back a fish down to Charlie because Charlie just stand there.
Yeah.
Charlie didn't really care about that.
But I tell you, Sandy, there's two people that used to guide that remind me of you is Phalo Badilla.
Of
and
me?
Yeah.
The little colonel.
Yeah, and Johnny Downey.
And John, who?
I
Charlie?
seen Johnny Downey come
Johnny.
in from the past and had one of those bad mornings, that, you know, and I literally seen him puke over the side of his boat. He was, and,
used to do
and
that.
they called Phalo Pissant because he was everywhere
Well,
there.
Frank dubbed me Flitter
Flitterfly.
Flitterfly, yeah.
You were doing,
I dubbed
and
you
I can't,
Flitterfly.
and I'm just not a very patient fisherman. I have never been a patient
Well, you're
fisherman.
hopped up on Mountain Dew. too.
Well, whatever the reason.
One thing that you would not have got away with whenever we was younger, and that is short drifting.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
Jesus.
What these guys do out there now, I'm telling you, there would be nothing
There was
but bodies.
nothing.
Well, that's always been an issue according to what your definition of short drifting is. But
It
yeah,
wasn't a problem
Short
back in the
drifting
day.
Yeah, when you don't
anything.
go around that,
Anything
when you don't
down
go around
tide.
that last boat.
yeah,
I don't care where he was.
yeah.
There wasn't a whole lot of
And
it
you-
going on until the jigging started.
And
Right,
you did not
that-
go up through the middle of that fleet
Yeah.
either. These guys, worst thing that ever happened was the invention of a depth recorder.
Oh, yeah.
Because if it wasn't for that, people would still be going around. But now they think they got to weave in, they
Yeah,
know the fish
and-
is there
and-
because that's where all the boats are. But
that's-
why they got the
That's another thing too, is you never see an old guy there like in my generation or we ran up tide when we got a fish on. But just as soon as we got him under control, we was over there by the big shoals or over there
Right,
by that
yeah.
dock. We
You
didn't
not-
stay in the middle of that fleet.
No, you got to get him east or west.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
And there's definitely a knack and some experience. It just
That's
takes time
right.
and experience to learn how to get them out of those
Yeah.
packs of boats.
I know when Nat started fishing here, one of the first things Freddie told you is you don't tow a fish over to the south side, right?
He told me that in the shark.
Damn
video.
shark will eat him every
Yeah,
time.
that's where I got.
But-
that's where I got familiar with old Hitler.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, always, that's why we went to the North Bar.
Well, people are always interested about sharks out there. I know you guys have seen some giant ones out there. I've seen some
We
giant.
used to call old Hitler Moby Dick.
Oh,
before
really?
we started old Hitler business.
Now,
But I got introduced to him because I had some people down there for the tobacco, and I never will forget this guy's name. His name was Bun Turner. And,
Bun?
Bun, like a hamburger bun. And he had his whole family with him, and I had, I think I had the Buccaneer, maybe, I don't know, but anyway, I drug that fish out on the south side, and he said, when we get this fish, can we have him mounted? I said, uh-oh. So I turned and went over to the north side.
because you knew what was coming.
Yeah, well, evidently as I was dragging that fish over there, old Hitler got involved, and I reached down and gaffed that tarpon, Sandy, and I had a fit in my hand, and I stuck my hand down there, and all of a sudden my goddamn boat jumped up in the air, and it was rocking back and forth, and all those people were hanging over the side, looking at that, and I saw a bit of mouth. And he took a bite out of that tarpon from his fuel plate to his butt. And I was scared to look because I thought, because my hand was down in that tarpon mouth. So.
People don't realize how big that big hammerhead,
Yeah,
those big
and
hammerheads
he
are.
bent my rudder and my propeller and knocked the plank loose on my boat. And, I was running Donald Jones with Little John.
Yeah.
And but those people they thought that happened. Oh, let's go get another one. Let's go.
John, didn't you have, what's the story on
You said I need to go
where we
clean my
came up with the
pants
name Hitler?
That old Hitler?
Yeah, the old Hitler. You knew that story, how that
I
game
had
came.
never heard the old story that just surfaced to me a couple of years ago. Apparently during World War II, this story was out. The only story that I had ever heard of old Hitler was started on a school bus
Right. That's what I
by
heard.
my younger brother Eugene and Harlan Wilbur. And it was actually Harlan Wilbur's story more than anything. And what they did, Harlan needed a composition for English. And so something got said about sharks or whatever. And so they started taking some old stories, just like what Dump was talking about, the shark hitting, busting the plank of his boat. Well, Freddie had one take and bite into the surf side, that boat he had, and took all them old stories and just put it on this one shark, called it old Hitler. And Harlan Wilbur, it went in the school newspaper. That story went to the Inglewood paper, and back then Sarasota had a paper. Then it went to Tampa, and then it was in magazines in England and South Africa. All those stories come from that right there.
Just from a school composition.
A kid's school. But now a couple of years ago, Dumpling or somebody was telling about during World War II that story was around about a shark named Old
Named
Hitler.
Hitler.
Yeah, but
I'd never
we
heard
called him Moby Dick first, and then Old Hitler. And of course, I've always heard the story that Hugh Futch and my dad in there, because they was always out there shark fishing and stuff. And I want to tell you the truth, that movie Jaws or what it was,
Yeah.
I've been in that situation.
It sounds like it.
I've been in that situation where my daddy made me chop that shark loose because the water, he was pulling it so hard, the water was busting over the stern, and he told me, chop that thing loose, chop that thing loose. And then, of course, I was out there and got tangled up in the rope, you know. But he wasn't afraid of the sinking. He was afraid that water was going to go in his engine, I guess.
Yeah.
You know? And,
Well, people, I know I've had them at the stern of my boat where, you know, they're 13, 14 feet long, and their eye would touch either end of this table, so a
Yeah,
good 6 foot from eye to eye.
Yeah.
Big
And
old black
just
hammerhead.
the dorsal fin, 5 foot out of the water maybe, you know, straight up. And so, I mean, I've seen some big ones. I don't know how big you guys saw them, but I've seen some big ones out there.
But it was all hammerhead back then.
Yeah.
The bull sharks
big
weren't as bad as they are now. These days, it's
I
more-
don't ever remember. a
And
bull
you
shark.
rarely had a shark inside where we fished. It was
Yeah.
always off the
Yeah.
number 12 buoy or
Yeah.
the south side.
Well, nowadays they're like packs of piranhas at times.
Well,
out
Yeah.
there.
those jiggers have trained them though.
They
to come up
did.
to
They
the boat,
did.
they
Yeah.
said.
And
That, and I think
now
the
those
long
sharks
lining-
stay in that hole, and the fish won't get in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that they stopped a lot of the long lining for sharks. I think there's more sharks than there used to be too. But either way,
What used to bring the sharks in here was not only the tarpon, but the ships used to
ships
come
would
in.
come
That's where
Right.
the big fish
And
start.
throw their garbage overboard and then follow them in here.
Right.
And then but that, I mean, if you ever hear a story about old Hitler, believe it, because it's true.
yeah, that was a big.
I'll tell you, I've seen that dorsal fin, and it looked to me, I don't know where it was or not, but it looked to me like it was flopping like this.
Yeah, couldn't even hardly hold it up.
Yeah, and I've seen, we put the lily irons to them and shot him and tied barrels on him, just like that movie Jaws. And
Well, that one that Clyde had
Yeah.
with the Babcocks out there that year.
That
where
was
there
the-
Yeah, the one that
Tater,
tater
yeah.
hook.
Yeah,
Tater,
Tater.
but Clyde went out with a
Yeah, had to go
with a
through-
bang stick
yeah.
Yeah, they hit him in the head and in the gills,
Yeah.
and he still broke the line.
Yeah.
yeah.
after 19
Like
hours or
16,
something.
yeah.
Yeah,
16,
that
18
one out.
hours.
Yeah, he ate a
Yeah.
tarpon and got hooked, if I remember
Right.
correctly,
Right.
and had him on tarpon gear, which was probably a Penn International 20 and 80-pound braided line and a wire leader.
But they-
Undersized tackle for a
Yeah.
1,300-pound fish.
There must have been several old Hitlers, because that the original old Hitler couldn't be living that long.
Yeah,
well,
well, I think it's pretty much a generic term for any of those really giant hammerheads that come in and follow those schools.
And that's
of tarpon.
all that I can remember there was the hammerheads.